What's up everybody, another beautiful day on the Dragonflight beta, and we're back with some more raid guides and previews. And today we're taking a look at heroic Kurog Grimtotem in the new raid Vault of the Incarnates. Now this is beta testing, so a lot of things can change, be added or well scrapped altogether. Now Kurog Grimtotem and his 4 elemental altars, by their powers combined, he is Captain Planet, the ultimate shaman. So name of the game is drag boss to one of the elemental altar. Boss gets empowered and gains abilities. The longer you stay at one altar, the more damage he will do with the altar's abilities. Drag boss to no altar and courageously stand in the middle and you'll trigger elemental surge, which deals ever increasing damage to the raid and empowers all altars. I mean, just heal forehead. Now on top of this, when you connect your Kurog to an altar, it triggers an elemental shift, dealing a large amount of raid-wide damage, and you take 80% more damage from this for 40 seconds, so you'll need to stay hooked up for at least 40 seconds per altar. Now Kurog actually has one ability that's his own, which is Thunderstrike. Frontal Cone aimed at the active tank deals a ton of physical damage, applies a dot and knocks you back, and this effect stacks. So with that said, let's talk altars. Starting with the Fire Altar, Kurog gains Magma Burst, Molten Rupture, and Searing Carnage. Magma Burst, Kurog hurls magma at random players. Unsure about the random part as it targeted pretty much everyone in the raid. Deals a ton of fire damage on impact and a dot, but more importantly it forms a lava pool on the ground, which deals a ton of damage if you cuddle in it. Now unsure if this is intended to target everyone or just a few players. Regardless, since it doesn't deal damage directly, it's safe to stack up on the entire raid, bait the Magma Burst, and move out before the impact hits. If you don't stack, you'll run out of space very fast, and these pools seem to last for around 2 minutes currently. Then there's Molten Rupture, unleashes multiple waves of lava towards random players, targets a few random players' location, and sends out these waves in a line towards those locations. Hurts a ton if you get hit. And at 100 energy, Searing Carnage. Infuses about half the raid with Searing Carnage, causing them to drop a flame patch at their location every 1 sec, which explodes after 1.5 seconds, dealing lethal damage in a 5-yard area. These infused players also take a bit of ticking damage over 5 seconds. And each successful cast of Searing Carnage increases Kurog's fire ability damage by 5% with Blistering Dominance. Now Searing Carnage is a bit like Council of Blood's Dark Recital in Castle Nathria. If you just YOLO run, you're going to cover a lot of area with patches. If marked players move as a group away from unmarked players, it gets a lot safer. So, not like this. Moving over to the cool side of the pillow, we have Frost Altar. Raid-wide damage through Biting Chill, just heal forehead. Frigid Torrent unleashes a hail of frigid orbs that deals a ton of damage and stuns you for 6 seconds. Melee beware. They are dispellable though, so if you do get hit and sit stunned for 6 seconds, remember, it's not your fault for not dodging, it's the healer's fault for not dispelling you instantly when you didn't dodge. And at 100 energy, you get Absolute Zero. Targets 2 players each get a 8-yard circle and will deal lethal damage split between everyone hit in these circles. However, you cannot stack these. Each circle will apply 1 stack of Frostbite to targets hit, and at 2 stacks you get Frozen Solid, and this cannot be immune. So what you want to do is really have 2 camps for it. Perhaps 1 in melee, 1 in range, and you should be fine. Unless you get into a situation where you'll get this more often than 30 sec, in which case you'd need 4 groups to split this. This also gives boss a stack of Chilling Dominance, 5 more frosty damage. Now for a more grounded approach, we have Earth Altar. Enveloping Earth targets a few random player, deals a bit of nature damage, and leaves a huge healing absorb on them. Just heal for it. Erupting Bedrock, Sludge Fist-esque Ground Slam, deals a ton of nature damage and knocks anyone within 15 yards back. And at 100 energy, you get Seismic Rupture. Spawns tons of earthy swirls near players that deals a ton of nature damage and knocks you back if you get hit. Each swirl also spawns an Earthbreaker add, and these needs to be tanked. Every 2 sec, they AoE the raid, deals a bit of nature damage and increases physical damage taken by 6% per stack. Now it says that this is applied to all enemies, but it seemed to only really target tanks, so I'm unsure which is intended. And Seismic Seismic Rupture gives boss a stack of Shattering Dominance, 5% earthy damage. And lastly, we have Storm Altar. Lightning Crash marks several players, giving them an arrow above their head, and they take 70% increased nature damage. They also inflict nature damage to the closest player for 10 seconds. So the goal here is that every Lightning Crash player has a non-marked player buddy to hold hands with, because if two marked players trigger Lightning Crash on each other with the 70% damage taken increase, well, it hurts. Shocking Burst targets several players, giving them a 12-yard circle. After a few seconds, this detonates. Get away from raid and blow up somewhere else. Then at 100 energy, you get Thunder Strike. Spawn several lightning marks, if you will, on the ground. Stand in one, take a chunk of damage. Miss to soak one, and everyone in the raid takes a ton of damage. Also gives Kurog Thundering Dominance, which is 5% lightning damage. So tying this up, each altar has its own gimmick, if you will. Some are pretty easy to deal with, some more annoying, and the longer the fight drags on, the more damage each altar will do due to the dominance buffs they get. Now, to add to the dominance part, there's an intermission at 66 and 33%. So when this starts, boss hops into the middle and becomes immune to damage and spawns two elementals. Now, I couldn't for sure figure out if there's a rhyme or reason to what adds spawns, as you'll get two different elements, like one fire, one earth elemental, etc. Because half the time we get one earth and one random element, always earth and one random element, and sometimes we got the same element as the altars we empowered, and sometimes one from the altar we empowered and one random, but most cases one earth. So unsure if it's gonna end up being completely RNG or if it's controlled in some way I couldn't figure out. Both ways have their own implications as to what strat you'd use. Regardless, let's check out these elementals. Tectonic Crusher uses Breaking Gavel, not the gavel but a gavel. Each consecutive melee attack against the same target increases the elemental physical damage by 3%. Ground Shatter, each player gets a 10-yard circle around them, and when it expires, it deals a ton of damage to enemies within it. Following this, Rock Boy will cast Violent Upheaval, which causes rocks to erupt from all the Ground Shatter areas, so where you drop the Ground Shatter. This eruption also deals damage. Strange. Then there's Frozen Destroyer. Cast Frostbind, interruptible cast that deals a high amount of damage and leaves a dot and movement speed reduction. Just interrupt forehead. Then there's Freezing Tempest, deals a low amount of frost damage to anyone within 10 yards and lethal damage to anyone further away. Now to spice things up a bit, there's Blazing Fiend. Magma Flow, as you slap the Blazing Fiend, lava pools will spill out at random locations near it, which deals a ton of damage if you stand in them. And on Heroic, these also spawn a Smoldering Hellion Ad, which flame bolts random targets. So for this, just make sure to tank it near an altar you aren't planning to use for a bit, as you lose a lot of space from these lava pools. Now lastly, there's Thundering Tempest. Vanishes, then appears behind a random target and channels Lethal Current, which deals nature damage to its targets and all players within 8 yards of that target over 6 seconds. So don't be near that player. Now to top this off, each one of these elements stacks up their element every 10 seconds, and upon defeat transfers these to Kurog, increasing his altar damage with that element by 5%, which, I mean, it's a dominant stack really. Now due to this, you'll most likely want to go into 66 and 33% with DPS cooldowns ready to make sure you don't get too many stacks from this, but this all depends on how hard it is tuned. Assuming which element you get during intermission is RNG, there might be a case where you need to swap which altar you intend to use, as you might have been empowering, say, Earth Altar, gaining a few stacks of dominance there, and then you get into intermission and plan to use Storm Altar after, but you get Storm Elemental and Fire Elemental. So following the intermission, you'd be on far higher stacks on both Fire and Storm Altar, so you might need to do Frost or Earth again. All speculations, and tuning can swing this dramatically one way or the other. All in all, this shapes up to be one of those fights with multiple right answers, and it might vary a bit depending on raid setup. For sure, some altars are way easier than others at the moment, but again, tuning can change that. For example, while testing, stacking up the Earth Altar was really easy, as the only hurdy part was for our poor tanks getting slapped harder and harder and harder. But as long as tanks survived, rest was extremely simple. Whereas, for example, Storm Altar, you need to coordinate Lightning Crash so they all have an uncrashed buddy, you have to soak marks during all of that, plus several players needs to run away with their big circles. So yeah, it's way more difficult than some of the others. But if they leave boss as is. I mean, just go Earthfalter. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Kurog Grimtotem on Heroic. Now if they make major changes to the fight and we get to test it again, I'll revisit this. Otherwise I'll drop an updated guide once the raid goes live. Now let me know in the comments what you think about this fight, and don't forget the usual stuff: like, comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I stream progression and testing on Twitch Thursdays and Sundays, and whenever there's raid testing announced. Don't forget to check out my Patreon if you want to help support me, my work, and my goal of upgrading my computer before Dragonflight. You also get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can get help with anything raiding related, and there's a ton of awesome people to help you out. Speaking of awesome people, make sure to check out the Liquid Women in Warcraft Discord if you want a supportive and safe Warcraft community. I'll leave a link to this in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.